Penn State football fans, how are you? I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Johnny McGonigal, who is now rocking. He's now far enough away from his Texas trip. He's kind of moved on from Texas stuff that he really liked, and now he's wearing. If you're listening to the podcast, you're not able to see this, but if you're checking out the video, he's got a Sixers hat on. And to be fair, he's no bandwagoner. Johnny is an avid Phillies, Eagles, Sixers, all three. Not so much Flyers, but that was a big Game 1 win, Johnny. Congratulations to you and your Sixers. I don't want to say they're in the driver's seat because Boston's one of those teams that just when you think you have them down, they're pretty good. So I think it's going to be one of those series for you. But it was a great way to start the best of 7 on the road. Courtesy of one James Harden.
Yeah, big game James, Houston Harden.
Do you have that outfit that he wore in your closet?
I do. I actually thought about wearing it today, but I didn't want to stunt on you like that. So I'm like, you know what? We'll keep it in the closet for now. Yeah, as soon as he wore what he wore walking up to Game 1, I'm like, okay, this man's about to pop off. And sure as hell he did. Yeah, it was great. Great Game 1 without Joel Embiid. Now Joel Embiid, officially the MVP, long overdue.
Yeah,
it looks like he's going to be back. We're recording this at 1:00 on Wednesday, ahead of Game 2 is tonight. So fingers crossed he actually plays. I think that was the report out there. So
yep.
So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not expecting a cakewalk by any means in this series. Like Boston's a really good team, and so we'll see. But I had to rep it. And just like I had to rep Bucky's on Tuesday's podcast coming back from Texas. Trust the process.
Johnny, is there any way I can rope you into this thought? If the Sixers would win the NBA title, would you be willing to wear James Harden's outfit from Game 1 into Beaver Stadium for the Michigan game?
If you bought it for me, yeah, because that thing is probably like $5,000, and I might be underselling it. I have no idea, but the stuff that he wears is like all these guys wear insanely expensive stuff. But yes, absolutely, I would even wear a knockoff item of it. I mean, we'd have to get Joe Hermit to take pictures of me like walking into the stadium, like they take.
Oh, believe me, Joe's probably going to edit this thing, and he's going to be in, but. I might become a Sixers fan in the short term just for this possibility. Yeah,
like fingers. If they win the NBA title, I'll wear whatever. I don't care. Okay. Yeah, that works for me.
You're a true fan, Johnny. It's as we record this, it is a robust 47 degrees in Harrisburg. It's actually, I think it was warmer in February than it is right now, but I know that we're going to turn the corner. It's going to get warmer, and once it starts to get warmer for like a couple days in a row, hopefully it'll stay that way. We're going to talk Penn State football. Just a reminder to the Penn State fan base, in case they forgot, big horse racing weekend on tap. Kentucky Oaks Friday at Churchill Downs, Kentucky Derby Saturday around 6:30. Hopefully you guys, if you're adventurous and you want to put some money down, you're going to go home a winner. Last year, like the longest shot in the history of the Kentucky Derby won at like 81-1. So anything's possible. We could get Johnny in a James Harden Game 1 outfit. So you guys can sure as heck win your superfecta at the Kentucky Derby. Johnny, we were talking about the NFL draft earlier in the week and where the guys landed, what were the good fits, what we liked about it. Perfect time, right? We're still thinking about the draft a little bit. Let's just get into the 2024 draft because I've been looking at it for a couple of months now, and anything could happen. But if these guys are all healthy and ready to go and they have a good season, there's going to be more than 6 people go in next year's draft. I'm pretty confident in that, and it could be double digits. So I think it's going to be really, really fun, and it's going to be in Detroit. So we might just have to cruise on out there. But anyway, I just think that Penn State fans probably aren't thinking about it now, but once we put the bug in their ear about, hey, this could be James Franklin's best Penn State draft in terms of volume. And I know we probably jinxed Joey Porter out of the first round, but as we sit here, Johnny, there's a couple guys that you could make a case for going in round 1 in 2024. At the very least, though, you look at both sides of the ball, there are a lot of draftable players on this Penn State team for next year.
Yeah, you talk about Jinx and Joey Porter Jr., like the amount of times that I wrote, over the last couple months of like, he's expected to become Penn State's first defensive back. I feel like I'm partially responsible for that jinx. Well, yeah, you talk about this past weekend's draft, the 2023 draft. We discussed that in full on our last podcast. So if anyone is listening now and wants to also hear us talk about Joey and Jair Brown, Juice Scruggs, Sean Clifford, covered that all on Tuesday's podcast. But this one, firmly about the 2024 guys, and boy, like there's a lot of them. And we can start at the top in terms of the first round potential that they have. I mean, they really. Yeah, again, it's way far out. We're looking at this now 11 months ahead of time, so a lot can change.
Why not?
For the better and for the worse for these guys and for teams and needs and all that. But boy, does Olu Fashanu look and seem like a first-round lock. Right now, a lot of teams would love an Olu Fashanu on their roster right now. Like, I mean, if they could take him right now, like I bet you there would be 10 teams. Yeah. Would jump at the chance to take him in the first round last weekend, and he ends up coming back for the 2023 season and not enters the draft. Notably, was on Dane Brugler of the Athletics midseason top 5 prospects in the country, behind Bryce Young, Will Anderson, I believe it was Miles Murphy of Clemson, and Jalen Carter. All 4 of those players went in the first round, and then I think 3 of them went in the top 5 or 10. So yeah, Olu is in rare company, but it's not just him. This is a really deep group that Penn State's going to have, powering them throughout the 2023 season.
Yeah, and just I did take a quick peek. Dane Brugler's 2024 draft early. They're all doing it right, but he's got Olu going number 3 overall. I know it. Hey, and I get it. It's May 3rd, right? But I do remember, Johnny. I don't remember if you were still covering Penn State for the Collegian, but after the 2013 or 2014 season, I think they had Christian Hackenberg going number 1 overall, or at some point they did. Like he was a future number 1 pick, and it didn't pan out. I feel a lot better about Olu than I do about Christian. Not that Christian was a second round pick, but Olu, man, I think after Caleb Williams and maybe Marvin Harrison, maybe the line will start with Penn State's left tackle. And he's not the only one, and he's going to have to back it up again this year. He's going to be a little bit more of a marked man. I don't know if that's possible with the way that he plays, but teams are aware of what he can do, and they're going to be doing some things probably to try and cause him at least some problems. I know he can get better as a run blocker, but as a pass blocker, I thought the most telling thing really was not so much what Dane Brugler said to you about him last fall, but when you went out to the combine to preview the guys in this year's draft, like a lot of really good defensive players remembered Olu, and he's only been on the scene for really, he started 1 game in 2021. It was the Outback Bowl, and he started 8 games in 2022, and they played some good teams. A lot of players remembered him, and to me, that I think actually said more about his talent than maybe even what Dane Brugler thought.
Yeah, you mentioned that at the combine. That was one where they bring out defensive ends and tackles for interviews at their own podiums, and I just thought it was a good opportunity to ask whoever went up against Olu, or maybe had watched him on film that season, to kind of assess his game. And a lot of these guys don't know players by names; they know them by numbers. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, number 74 from Penn State. And I just remember Derek Hall, the edge rusher from Auburn. Derek Hall, ends up telling me, I don't know why, he decided to go back to school. That dude's amazing. And he got similar praise from the other players as well in Indianapolis. It felt like Olu should have been there because he is that talented. And you mentioned Dane had him going number 3 overall in his early 2024 mock. That's pretty consistent. Yep. I took a look at some of the other mocks around the draft community, USA Today, Yahoo,
Yeah.
The Draft Network, Pro Football Focus all had Olu going in the top 6 overall. And again, a lot can change. But you know what doesn't really change is size. You know, it doesn't change his like instincts as a left tackle. And yeah, I mean, quarterback can be a fickle position because you're depending on everyone else doing their job. But when it comes down to a left tackle doing his job, it's really one-on-one or sometimes one-on-two. And Olu he's passed every test. And like you said, he can get a little bit better in the run game.
Yep.
But man, when you're that good in the pass game and you're that imposing and you allow, I think, one quarterback hit on like 300 pass snaps last year, and he's only going to get better. So really excited to see what kind of strides he takes, and fingers crossed he stays healthy. Should be a top 5, at least a top 10 pick next year.
Yep. This list that we have is going to be pretty long, and I think there's some really interesting players because 2023 is going to be a pivot year for them. I mean, they could ascend, they could stay the same, they could be, for whatever reason, just okay, and it's going to impact if they want to come out, and if they do come out, if they have to come out, where they're going to go. But before we get to them, let's just talk about 2 other players that I think the Penn State fan base, it's kind of like a Captain Obvious, right? Kalen King, the corner, who's going to be in his 3rd year, and another 3rd-year player who spent his first year at Maryland, transferred to Penn State in 2022, had a great year, and is bigger and stronger, probably meaner and faster, meaner in a good way. But Chop Robinson, both those guys I've seen in first-round mocks. Again, they're mocks, right? And as far as like mocks go, other than Dane Brugler's, I don't take anyone else's really that serious because I think everyone copies. It's like copying the A+ students' homework. You know what I mean? I think they're taking their lead from Dane. But I do think legitimately talent-wise, Kalen and possibly Chop, could be first-round guys.
Yeah, I think so too. And you look at the production that Kalen King had last year. Yeah. The storyline was, hey, everyone is throwing away from Joey Porter Jr. It's like, well, you're throwing at an arguably better corner. Like, I mean, if you look at the coverage stats and all that kind of stuff, and then just the eye test too. Obviously, love what Joey Porter Jr. is as a player, and I still think he probably should have gone in the first round. But Kalen King could very well end up in the first round too next year, and Joey has recognized that too. Even at the combine at Pro Day. He was asked about Kalen King, and both times he said, he's a future CB1. He's a guy that, teams like, scouts and coaches have asked Joey Porter about Kalen King during their interviews and film sessions and stuff during the pre-draft process. So there's already some early buzz around him. And you know what? When you have 21, passes defended in a season, 3rd most in the country, and one of the best, if not the best, coverage grade in single coverage per Pro Football Focus, you're going to have a lot of buzz around you. And Bob, we talked about potentially driving out to Detroit for the NFL draft. Michigan native Kalen King,
kind of lining up, right? It's kind of lining up.
Wouldn't that be a story, right? For him to maybe attend the draft and be a first round pick, and even if he ends up not being a first round pick, like some NFL teams can be really happy. Oh, yeah. When they end up with Kalen King, because, boy, is he a really good player. And same with Chop Robinson, too. And just the rise that he's made, it's been meteoric over the last year. Because think about it, last April, he committed to Penn State. And it's not like he's just like under the radar, like 2-star prospect or something. He was a 5-star that decided to go to Maryland and decided that he needed a fresh start. And for him to hit the ground running as fast as he did, I believe he was 2nd and 3rd on the team in sacks and tackles for loss, and among the best in the country in pass rushing grade. His effectiveness, his ability to disrupt the passer, even if he's not, even if he didn't finish with a sack, he was always just kind of living in the heads of tackles and quarterbacks in the Big Ten last year, and I expect him to do the same.
Yeah. Blue-white breakdown. It's Wednesday. It's below 50 degrees. Johnny's got his Sixers hat on, getting ready for Game 2 as we record this. But we're talking about Lions in the 2024 draft. We'll be in Motown. That'll be a pretty interesting environment. But John, I was just thinking, as we continue to build off this list, another logical player that I don't think there's any question he should go pretty high is another defensive end, Adisa Isaac, who was a member of the 2019 recruiting class. Had to overcome an Achilles injury, significant. Rounded into form last year, got better, I thought, as the year went on. But I guess what I wanted to bring up is, if there's any doubt that either Olu or Chop or Adisa are going to get better, just think about the practice field at Penn State. Like, there's no days off, man. These guys are going to be going against each other in August and in September. Probably not as hard in September, right? But Olu's going to have to deal with those two, and then he's going to have to deal with Deni Dennis Sutton. So he's definitely going to get better. And I think the same goes for all these defensive ends, because if Dane's right and Olu's as good as we think he is, like, what kind of test are they going to face in the fall that's going to be any tougher than going against that guy in practice?
The cliche that players and coaches love to lean on, Bob, you know this as well as I do, is the iron sharpens iron. And sometimes when you hear it, you roll your eyes or whatever. It's just used so much. But this is seriously an iron sharpen iron situation when it comes to Olu Fashanu and then these defensive ends in practice, whether they're working in the summer on their own or in training camp in August. Obviously did a little bit there in spring ball. I think also what will get Chop and Adisa to raise their levels as well is Deni pushing them for snaps behind them. Because we saw in the spring game, and we saw on tape, even going back to high school, what kind of player he was and is. And, he's going to be one to watch for the 2025 NFL draft.
Oh, yeah.
So
let's not get ahead of ourselves, but that's going to be something 2025.
Exactly. And so when you have a player like that who, played obviously a big, played a role last year, will play a big role this year. Mm-hmm. And James Franklin and the staff use him as a third starter. But when you've got a hungry young player like that with that kind of talent pushing you, if you're Adisa Isaac, the only thing you can do is get better. The only thing you can all you can do is push yourself more. And I think that'll really help him because he's already an NFL guy, in my opinion. I don't know where he kind of lands in hey, is he day 2? Is he early day 3? Like what kind of prospect will he be? But we know he's a really good player, and he'll be playing on Sundays as long as he stays healthy. Because you mentioned the Achilles injury, and that's just one thing he can't afford, and it's just some bad luck with another injury like that. So hopefully he stays healthy. He's all good because man, those 3 DNs rotating together, again, testing Olu Fashanu and testing themselves throughout the summer and into the fall.
Yeah, and I feel like, he might have a bigger ceiling than a lot of people realize, because I did feel like the further he got removed from that injury and the rehab went better, the more comfortable he got, the more he trusted, his base. But also, you look at Adisa and you're like, why are you guys so high on him? Well, just think about the depth chart he had to climb since he got to Penn State. Before the injury, he was dealing with Odafe Owe, Achaka Tony. I think, when he, as a freshman, I think Yetur Gross-Matos was on that roster. It was just, it was tough sledding just to even get noticed on the practice field with that kind of defensive end room. Not that the field is clear by any means now, but I think he is hungry. He is motivated. He knows what's in front of him. I think he feels a lot better about where he is physically. And I think this is going to be one of the more motivated players on Penn State's team. And I think he could have left, but I think he definitely made the right decision to come back, because I think he knows if he can play 12 or 13 games like he played the last 6 games of 2022, I think he's really going to help himself.
I think so too. And I think he's just another one of the guys on the defense that could or really will hear their names called this time next year, because you look at defensive tackle, there's some opportunity there, not necessarily guarantees.
Yeah.
Hakeem Beamon, Keziah Izzard, maybe Devon Elise. In the secondary, we talked about Kalen King. Opposite him, Johnny Dixon is just an underrated player coming over from South Carolina a couple of years ago as a transfer, and the impact that he made last year as Penn State's third corner and filling in a lot too when Joey Porter ended up missing time towards the end of the season. I think he's going to be a draftable player. Keaton Ellis, potentially a veteran safety who, just recently, really became a starting safety like this past season.
Yeah.
Was his first year really getting into that position and in an advanced role. So if he takes another step under Anthony Poindexter, I think that could be in play. And then unless I'm missing anyone, Curtis Jacobs.
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, I think Johnny Dixon's an interesting guy to watch. I'm curious to see who is going to replace Joey as the field corner to the wide side of the field. You can make the argument that I believe that Kalen was the boundary corner a lot of the times, and I think they put Joey on the field and just said, "Come get him if you want him," and a lot of teams avoided him, other than Purdue. But Johnny can handle himself. You mentioned Keaton Ellis, but yeah, to me, the guys that I think Johnny's an interesting guy. Curtis Jacobs for sure, and those two tight ends. Like, I think, I do think that assuming they're both play in the fall, that those are guys that are going to test very well. And you saw in this draft, you don't have to have super flashy numbers as a receiver. If you catch between 30 and 40 passes, but you can show up. You can show up as a blocker, right? Look what it did for Brenton Strange. Look what it did for a couple other guys. Look at a couple of pass catchers that kind of fell because they really couldn't block. I just think that these guys are probably going to be more valued at the next level by teams that are really hungry for, guys who will be active in the running game. So yeah, Curtis, Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson. Just your thoughts on those three and how you kind of see them going into what should be their final. Well, it's definitely Curtis's, I think, final year. But what about the other two?
Yeah, I like Curtis, and I like how he grew last season. I just remember being out at the Rose Bowl and talking to Manny Diaz and asking him about Curtis, and he couldn't stop talking about how much of a cerebral player he had become, the different roles that he had to take on. To help facilitate getting Abdul Carter on the field more, just changing positions, changing responsibilities, and then you match that with the athleticism and the speed he has at linebacker. Like, I feel like he has even more plays to make than what he's made already. I think his best football is ahead of him, which for him is great because he's already played pretty good ball for Penn State.
Yeah.
So, having that understanding already, is also kind of invaluable between him and Abdul, and then whoever's in the middle, Kobe King or Tyler Elston. But knowing your role and understanding the guys you're working off of going into the year two, I think helps you play more freely at linebacker. So I like Curtis. The tight ends, Theo Johnson in the news recently for not the best thing, getting in a fight at a frat and breaking someone's $500 sunglasses apparently. So that's not ideal. Penn State said that they'll handle it, and so we'll see if any kind of suspension or repercussions come from that. But if he's on the field in the fall, which he should be, whether it's maybe some kind of suspension or whatever, he is a really, really talented player. He's a phenomenal pass catcher, great speed for his size at 6'5", 6'6", and had at least one catch of 25 yards in 6 of Penn State's final 7 games of last season. He's a threat down the field, and he's a player that you could see Drew Aller targeting a lot this upcoming season, especially with a little bit of uncertainty at wide receivers. So Theo Johnson has a real chance to improve his stock as a draft asset, as a guy that could be in the NFL this time next year.
Yeah, and as far as Tyler goes, I know that he didn't play. I think primarily a quarterback in high school, but I do think I've seen Tyler improve. Every year he's been at Penn State, he's added some weight. He's definitely comfortable as a tight end. He can block. They're not afraid to put him in that T formation either. But they're looking for a lead dog in the tight end room, right? They definitely are. It's going to be one of those two. And it just depends on how it plays out. But I could see Tyler taking a pretty big jump this year too. I think everyone sees Theo as a receiver. I think he's got a little bit more to him as a blocker. But both those guys, they're not quite carbon copies of each other, but they're both 6'5", 6'6", about 250, and that's right in the NFL's wheelhouse. Theo ran 4.51 over a year ago, so that will, if he does anywhere close to that, assuming he has a good year, he'll be on the radar. But I do think those guys have shown they're not afraid to stick their nose in there, whereas some other tight ends who are athletic really weren't able to do that, and it showed up, I thought, for some of them on draft day. But yeah, I think they're fascinating, and I also think that two players I wanted to talk about for different reasons, but that are guys that I think they can really help themselves this year for different reasons. One's Keandre Lambert-Smith, the wideout. The other is a guy that's not even at Penn State yet, Dante Cephas. And I know it's a projection. He hasn't even practiced once, but man, here's a guy that was a dangerous player in the MAC. And the MAC's a legit league now, and he caused a lot of problems for some pretty good secondaries, whether it was a non-conference game or what have you. But if those two both come out firing, and I'm deliberately, there's some third-year guys or some fourth-year guys that I didn't mention, I wrote about it. I just feel like they just haven't shown enough yet. So if they have one nice year, it won't be enough. But I mean, I feel like Cephas has the tape. Keandre has some tape from the Rose Bowl. And those are two guys that I think that at the very least, I'm sure Dante is, but I think even Keandre's got to be thinking a little bit about the NFL.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that they have the tape. They have the opportunity. They have the chance to be the number one wide receiver in the offense of one of the best teams in the country. Yep. And that kind of exposure, that kind of visibility that it brings from the NFL draft community, I mean, it's invaluable for Keandre Lambert-Smith or Dante Cephas if they both play up to their potential and up to their standards, because we've seen Dante Cephas do it at a slightly lower level in the MAC. Yeah. Some good football, like you said, being played, but it's not the Big Ten. 1,900 yards over 2 years is good in any league. Yeah. And you watch what he's done to Power 5 teams and non-conference games. You can project and you can see a world in which Dante Cephas comes in and, goes for 900 receiving yards, 800, 900 receiving yards. You could see that happen. You could see Keandre Lambert-Smith become one of the best downfield threats in the Big Ten in the country because we've seen it, in the Rose Bowl. We've seen it in spurts here and there. We know that he's got speed and his route running is nice. He just got to do it a little bit more consistently. And James Franklin, that was one thing that he harped on throughout spring ball. I remember asking him, what next step do you need to see from Keandre Lambert-Smith? And he said he needs to be a number one guy. He needs to be the dude. And if Keandre Lambert-Smith is able to do that, then he will be an NFL draft prospect this time, next year. If he is the third guy again, if he doesn't take that step, then we're having a different conversation. But yeah, you mentioned there's some other guys in there, like, I don't know, like if Caden Wallace has a really good season, if, you got Hunter Norzat, but like
Wormley,
Daquan Hardy, Wormley's an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, I think he's one of the. I was going to mention him and Wallace to you before we wrap this up. I think Daquan Hardy. I would never count a guy like Daquan Hardy out because he's a guy that plays bigger than his size. He plays the nickel corner. You don't have to be a gigantor to play, and he could probably help on special teams. So I would not count out a guy like him. John Reed wasn't much bigger than him. And I think there's some value there. But as far as physical specimens, Sal Wormley and Caden Wallace, when they first got to Penn State, I think I would have said, how are these guys not going to be in the NFL for whatever reason? And here we are. I think Wormley is trending in a much better direction than Caden is right now, only because I think Wormley's got a role. And Caden really doesn't just yet. So those two guys, to me, I think are going to be interesting to watch. And I think they have NFL. I think they definitely have NFL talent, but it's going to be what do they do with the spotlight on them?
Yeah, I'll say this too. Even though he has more positional flexibility, so you understand it. If you told me last April that Juice Scruggs would be a second-round pick,
yeah,
I don't think many people would really believe that. And that's not knocking Juice Scruggs by any means. It's just like, you don't see that kind of future for some of these guys on the offensive line. You don't know until they are required to step up into a major leadership role, be flexible with injuries around them, and prove themselves time after time after time. And that's what Juice Scruggs did. A credit to him, and it was great to see him go as early as he did. But we're sitting here, and there's a handful of these guys that maybe they're going to be surprising late second round picks next year, and we don't see that right now. But that's what summer's for. That's what the season's for, and the pre-draft process. But bottom line, Penn State's going to have a lot of guys get picked, unless there's just like an injury crisis across the entire team, and it all gets pushed off to 2025, because there are so many talented dudes on this team, and there's a reason why there's a lot of hype, both internal and external, local, regional, national, around this program. And it's because they got pretty damn good players, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and I wrote something about that, I think, on Sunday. I mentioned, I think, there's pretty much all the guys we talked about, but I just know, Johnny, we're going to wrap this up, and Harrison Wallace is going to have the breakout year at wideout.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Zakee Wheatley, I think is entering his third year, is going to be like the next ball hawk, Jair Brown-like player at Penn State. And I was like, you know what? They really haven't done it yet, but it would have been. I just couldn't pull the trigger on those two, because then I was like, well, you can't mention them all. But those two, I feel like athletically, I'm just going to mention them at the end of this podcast, so I can say that I did, because they're both freaks too.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just rattle off the roster. Let's get into the
Kobe King. Yeah, nope. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mentioned Kalen's good. Forgot about the Kobe King breakout, but what we're really talking about, Johnny, is this roster is good to go. It really is, and a lot's going to hinge on the quarterback play. But I'm telling you, you look around the field at just about every position, even on the offensive line, regardless of what David Polak thinks, whatever his name is. But Pollock. These guys are Pollock. These guys are just they've closed ground in a hurry, and there's some issues, I think, throughout the Big Ten, and the way this team finished. They could have 12 guys drafted this next year. They could have 8. They could have 14 or 15. But that is how talented this roster potentially is.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. One small thing before we go, Bob, that I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
So I've been told by a couple people that I'm pronouncing the Wisconsin town wrong. The town that is that has Catholic Memorial in it. It's not Waukesha. It's Waukesha. I believe I'm saying that.
Waukesha.
Waukesha. And if I'm saying that wrong again, someone, just the cheeseheads that the couple of them that have reached out to me, let me know. I think I got that down now.
There's only one way to find out. You and I need to go to Madison, Wisconsin on PennLive's dime, spend like a week mingling with people, whether it's in taverns or restaurants or
we'll just post up in
the streets. Yeah. We'll get it all down, because it's become Penn State West, right? State College West. So that way we're going to get all the pronunciations right. And in a couple years, when all these guys are stars, we're going to have an in, just because our bosses were kind enough to send us on an all expense paid trip out there for like 1 week. So the minute we're done with this podcast, I think we're going to have to reach out to some of the higher ups, and I'm sure they'll have no problem with us doing that. But I'm glad, at the very least, you're trying to get it right. It took me 3 years to get Veilleux right. Then he left, and then I was calling him Christian Veilleur right before he left, and then it was Veilleux all along, and I felt like a bigger idiot than I normally am.
Look, Bob, I'm still stuck on the idea of getting State Street brats for like a day, expense on the company dime. So let's do that. Let's plan on that.
All right, Johnny. Good talking with you. Good luck to your Sixers and your James Harden outfit shopping, and we'll be back next week to talk about Penn State football.